you can hear that wind blowing out there. It's a kind of a tough country.
Grazing is really important to this area.
But it originates on federal lands where you can run a good-sized herd of cattle.
Nobody wanted one of these two-bit places 60 years ago when there was no electricity and you had to use an outdoor privy and whatever. And I said, you couldn't give somebody one of these places and they weren't worth a dime. And I said, now everybody wants to live in the country.
They want to protect us to death, regulate us, or they're going to save us from ourselves.
The Bureau of Land Management administers 245 million acres of federal land in the West. 157 million of those acres are allotted for grazing, where ranchers apply for permits to use tracts as summer range.
We run on several common allotments and private allotments, federal, state patented combination area, which is 300,000 plus acres.
We run a cow-calf yearling operation on federal land.
I don't know what the breakdown is exactly.
We're surrounded by federal land, pretty much so.
Approximately 40,000 is government.
Our summer permit is 98% BLM.
So we're around 900 head of cattle during the year.
No, we have parcels that are scattered around on different springs. And
we graze around 100,000 acres altogether. And it's all intermingled state, federal.
Because lands are permitted only for seasonal use, ranchers must own enough land to care for their livestock the rest of the year.
You're dealing with permittees that are working hard on the ground, and you don't always agree with them, and they don't always agree with you, but you know, if you can reach a common understanding and have a common goal and try to get something better on the ground, that's what you like to see. So.
The way we run livestock is we manage them, but they're very similar to wildlife. We're calving, they're reproducing just prior to green grass. They go out, they migrate, they're semi-territorialized. When the weather starts to turn, the leaves change color, however you want to look at it, they start coming back home. They're very similar to wildlife here. Cattle, livestock run on the open range.
And you know, we've had all kinds of horse wrecks and all that kind of stuff. It's a hazardous business.
Okay, AUM, that's a government acronym that ag people use all the time. It's Animal Unit Month. That's forage required to run one cow and calf for 30 days. That's your basic formula for your grazing fee. Preference, you have so many AUMs which are attached to your base property on your ranch. A lot of the general public, they have a misperception. They see like this year the fee's set at $1.35 per cow per month. Well, they just go, well, that doesn't sound like much, but we have all the non-related fees that we have to take care of too. Well, grazing fee and all that, I couldn't tell you a dollar figure. We're gonna be, you know, not that much money for the fee itself, but by the time we go through the year of the gas, the gathering the cows, getting them back, the fence maintenance, we maintain over 100 miles of fence. Those kind of things, that's what adds up when you come down to the dollars per month. We're still up there close to $20 probably.
The BLM will not acknowledge the fact that how critical an AUM is to the economy of the local community.
So every time we lose a permitted AUM, it's $500 out of the county coffers.
The BLM, however, is not only a grazing agency. It must balance that one use with others, such as mineral exploration, recreation, and environmental protection.
Well, it's very dictated what you can do. The season of use, the class of livestock you have on it, if it's sheep or cattle. It seems like if you try to change, they want to take away part of your rights. There's terms and conditions on your lease that you have to follow.
It's more difficult all the time.
When they get to an upper limit or over, the first thing that will happen with the Bureau is they'll want to cut our preference down. Maybe it's temporary or suspended. Thing is, once they suspend an AUM, very hard to ever get it back.
You know, some of the people are reasonable and they want you to be out there. It's unfortunate when you get someone that's trying to catch you making a mistake, and that's what they dedicate their life to, is being the cop.
If they would do their job and have good inventories, then I think what makes people angry is when you tell people no without a good reason.
Part of a rangeland management specialist's job is enforcement of grazing regulations and compliance with the terms and conditions of grazing permits. And I've had to trespass and fine people for non-compliance with their grazing permits. I found that if you have a strong relationship with the producers and you know your producers, doing that is actually easier for me, because I can usually understand what was happening with those people and why it may have happened. In those situations, I've found that you just have to do your job as a professional.
No government work is simple. Agency managers must fulfill complex requirements within stringent regulations before any changes can be made.
They're kind of the one that everyone ends up hating in the end. They're trying to please a lot of diverse interests out there.
And BLM for this area, land or resource area, is just coming up with their management plan. And that document was 1,200 pages long. I spent 2 weeks reading that document, attempting to read that document and comment on it.
Well, you decide where you can graze and where you can't graze, and where you can graze under what conditions. You decide where you can drill and where you can't, and under what conditions, where you can lease.
I did a 2-mile electric fence, and it was just one wire so that the antelope could go under, but it took about 5 or 6 years to get that permitted.
Despite the complex relationship between the BLM and grazers, there is a third party with interests of its own.
Well, Western Watersheds, it's pretty basic what they want. They want all livestock off federal lands, period.
They're trying to totally eliminate grazing from March 15th to the end of June.
There's quite a segment of people out there that just want livestock off federal lands, period. And that's the ones that we don't have anything in common with.
The question of whether WWP wants to remove all livestock from public lands is a common question. From an economic standpoint, most of the livestock production in the arid West is not economically sustainable without the massive taxpayer subsidies that we provide to it. If they had to pay for those costs as part of their normal business, I would say probably 65% of the livestock industry in the arid West wouldn't exist.
I sensed anyway that they wanted to make things better on the ground. However, my personal experience here in Lander now is that they've gone up an upper level, and they really in some areas want to close areas to livestock grazing, and they don't feel that we're being responsive enough to the land, and that the permittees in the BLM aren't healing the land as quickly as they'd like to see that. So they feel that total rest or no livestock grazing at all would be the best solution, at least for the short term, for the next 10 years, to allow some of these areas to heal up.
I disagree that we haven't taken care of it, or we wouldn't be here the length we have.
We believe in taking care of it, and we think that livestock grazing is the right thing to do, and that's what we've done here for 100 years, and we wouldn't want to change that.
Never get any acknowledgement that we've done anything good, always getting browbeaten for what a bad job we've done.
In arid country, water is critical for both wildlife and livestock. The creek washes and arroyos of the West, known scientifically as riparian systems, are frequent battlegrounds.
Probably the most significant issue I deal with are impacts to riparian areas. Livestock have completely degraded to an extreme level virtually all the riparian areas in the entire allotment and in a wide range of the arid West.
And in our field office, particularly riparian areas have been a flashpoint almost.
Cowboys are in Marlboro ads, they really don't exist anymore. And so nobody wants to do the work that's required to manage the livestock. And as a result, we have this horrendously degraded riparian conditions because cattle especially during the summer. I mean, basically from mid-June through, mid-October, spend the vast majority of their time sitting in riparian areas. Even when there's forage in the uplands, they sit in riparian areas, and the damage is just stunning.
He's asked for some changes on that Green Mountain allotment as well as some of our other allotments as part of the permit renewal process. And I think we've been fairly responsive to their requests over the years. He and his organization, I think, feel that we haven't worked diligently enough and responded quickly enough to what they would like to see.
1 to 2% of that entire allotment is on federal riparian, but because of the way the Clean Water Act is written, it becomes the crux of the whole deal. I mean, it's this utopian view of what it ought to look like, and nobody knows what it looked like 150 years ago when the buffalo were out there. Really, they don't know.
Basically, that's completely false. Yes, there were some buffalo in this area, and basically in the western half of Wyoming, and a little bit in Utah and Idaho, but nothing compared to like the plains situation in the tallgrass prairie. It's completely two separate things.
They have a lot to say in how we operate and what we deal with all the time. We didn't used to have that pressure, and they have kind of a level playing field now.
Basically, the entire 11 western states, which cover about a third of the United States, produce 2% of the nation's beef supply on public land. So even if you eliminated public lands livestock grazing entirely overnight, it would have virtually no effect whatsoever. Why should we as a society allow our riparian areas or our ecosystem as a whole to be so degraded for something that has basically no economic input, and causes all kinds of problems? The current situation doesn't make sense.
Some of the conservation groups in Fremont County have been perceived as being, radical, but I've opened a dialogue with them on this RMP. What do you guys want? Let's sit down and talk about it. Because we're all going to get affected one way or the other.
In general, the permittees on public lands don't appreciate what I do, because basically what I do is hold them to account to their permit terms and conditions and laws and regulations on the books. And similarly, on the side of the BLM, they've been able to basically just have a relationship with the permittees without the public. So public has been taken out of the equation of public lands management.
As a rangeland management specialist, part of your job is getting to know your people as well as getting to know the land. So at least I did anyway, I think if you're going to be effective and you talk to anybody else, you really need to get to know your people. You kind of learn that. Some people learn it quicker than others. You establish these working relationships, you get to know the producers, you get to know their kids because they're out on the ground with you, and in many cases you become friends. Not in all cases, but in many cases.
I consider the two agencies, the two land management agencies, sort of like kleptomaniacs, except the big difference is they never steal for themselves. They only steal for others.
Some people use a term that the agency has been captured by its clients. If you're a range management specialist, you're asking a person that is a private business entity to do certain things on the ground as part of their operation to make the grazing plan work so that you can achieve your land use objectives, your rangeland health objectives. So you've certainly got to have a strong working relationship with that individual. You got to have patience and understanding. You've got to know your people, you got to know your ground or your allotments.
Decided something, Jack. 110 put in. Pardon me? Range management is more opinion than it is science.
All right, so put an X at the 30-second.
No, this is science. This is science.
Voodoo science.
Always tried to draw that line between having to do your job and be a professional and not crossing over into being too much of a friend or not doing your job because of your friendship with the permittee.
Unfortunately, with the politics surrounding public lands livestock grazing, we don't have political clout. It's as simple as that. And so the only other effective tool is, litigation. We don't have any other ability to change agency behavior without, as horrid as it sounds, hitting him over the head with a 2x4. Nothing else works.
We are in our third round of grazing decisions and environmental documentation as a result of 3 different litigations. My personal experience on the Green Mountain allotment is that litigation has been counterproductive, and that we're spending our limited time and resources, both the BLM, the Game and Fish, the environmental and conservation organizations, as well as the other interested publics that are interested in the Green Mountain allotment's time.
BLM's going to be the whipping boy in that whole process.
We were set to implement this first round of decisions and the drought hit. This drought is on a magnitude of the 1950s drought we had, and then even parts of it were as bad as the 1930s drought we had. And so we cut the grazing levels back. Those guys, during that 6 or 7 year period, were only running between 15 and 20% of their permitted use out there. And it just hammered them financially. But yet, Jonathan didn't feel that we were still doing what we should be doing. He felt we should just close the allotment to grazing. And so the approach he's taken is all or nothing, in my view. The Western Watershed's approach has been not to collaborate, but it's to drop the hammer on you.
There are some very good people. I don't want to be critical of the personnel at BLM, but they're in a bad situation, and environmental groups can file lawsuits and then get reimbursed by the federal government for the legal fees. But if we try to step in and defend, we don't get any reimbursement. That's on our nickel, it's private money that has to defend these things if they want to go to bat and defend the BLM, which we have.
If you prevail in litigation against the federal government, the Equal Access to Justice Act provides for your legal fees, so that there's some kind of slightly more even playing field. Basically, Western Watershed's project, and I don't have exact figures, but I don't think we've made, a cent off of the EJA fees in the last, decade. And so to say that basically we're sort of like a litigation machine that survives only by, doing litigation is, it's basically absurd.
I contend probably 95% of our problems, if you left the lawyers on the sideline, we'd have them solved and go forward. But if you leave those lawyers on the sideline, we'd probably come up and have a pretty good plan. But that's kind of my anti-attorney position. But
since I've been in Lander, I've probably developed a half dozen close relationships, almost friendships, if you will, people in the environmental and conservation organizations. They typically started under a CRM effort, coordinated resource management effort, where I got a chance to initially meet the individual and then listen to that individual express their views on this particular area we were concerned about, and see their passion for what they were talking about and why they care so much about a piece of ground or a part of our district. And over time, working with them on projects on the ground, side by side, which is one of the strengths of CRM, you develop a working relationship and a bond because you're working towards a common goal. Paposia Conservation District, the Paposia Anglers, earlier the Wind River Backcountry Horsemen Organization, and the people that in that half dozen or so were people that were willing to come out and work on the ground with you side by side to change something for the better. The people that tend to keep you at arm's length or tend to just do everything through email or through the office or in real formal settings, but really don't spend any time on the ground helping you get a problem corrected or something. I don't have strong working relationships with those people.
Many people think of Western Watershed's project as sort of a radical enviro-loony group. But basically, all I do all day long is just make sure that our public lands management agencies, the Forest Service and the Bureau of Land Management, comply with the laws and regulations on the books.
The answer or the test is, what's the land look like? What's the land really look like when you're done? And that's, you know, as a range manager, that's your legacy when you leave.
It's been said several times, without agriculture, you don't have any culture for everybody.
Yeah, I just hope I can do this for a long time and stay in the business.
I am very fortunate to have been able to be here all these years, and maybe the good Lord will give me another 30.
So I told him I just had one bit of advice for him: eat lamb and wear wool.